The blood was nothing, but the way he touched her hand made Brennan want to weep. She had fought for 13 straight hours, killed more men than she could count, and taken wounds that would have felled a horse. The gash across her palm where her own shield had split and sliced through the leather of her grip was deep enough to see bone, and it throbbed with every heartbeat. Around her, the field surgeon's tent buzzed with groans and the sharp smell of blood and alcohol, soldiers waiting their turn with varying degrees of patience. She had pushed past them all, not because she demanded priority, but because her captain had physically shoved her toward the tent flap and told her to get the damned hand seen to before she bled out. The surgeon was human. Tall, maybe just past 6 feet, with dark hair pulled back and hands that moved with absolute certainty. He had looked up when she entered, his gray eyes taking her in without flinching, and gestured to the stool beside his work table. "Sit." She sat. He lifted her hand, turning it gently in the lamplight, and that was when everything inside her went still and strange. No one touched Brennan gently. No one had in years. She was the weapon you pointed at the enemy, the blade that never dulled, the orc warrior who had survived more battles than most soldiers ever saw. People clapped her shoulder in congratulation or shoved her forward into the next fight, but no one cradled her broken hand like it might shatter. "This needs stitches," he said quietly. His voice was steady without judgment or urgency. "I am going to clean it first. It will hurt." "Everything hurts," she said, and hated how rough her voice sounded. He glanced up at her just for a moment, and something in his expression softened. "That does not mean it should." Then he began to work, and Kira discovered that she had been wrong about pain. She knew deep cuts and broken ribs and the burn of infection, but she had never known this, the terrible tenderness of being cared for. He cleaned the wound with hands that never faltered, never pressed harder than necessary, and when he began to stitch the torn flesh back together, he murmured a quiet apology for each pull of the thread. "You do not need to apologize," she managed. "Yes," he said, "I do." She watched his face as he worked. He had the kind of features that might have been handsome if they were not so serious, lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled sometimes, but not often. There was a scar along his jaw, faint and old, and his hands were marked with dozens of small nicks and burns, the evidence of a life spent in tents like this one. When he finished the stitches, he did not simply wrap the wound and send her away. Instead, he began to bandage each finger individually, securing her hand so that the stitches would not pull, and the care he took was so meticulous that Kira felt something crack open in her chest. "What is your name?" She asked because she needed to say something or she would do something foolish like cry. "Liam Brennan," he said, and then paused, his hand stilling. "Brennan. Are you no relation?" she said. It was a common enough surname in these parts. "Kira Brennan." "Well, Kira Brennan," he said, resuming his careful wrapping. "You are going to keep this hand dry and clean for the next 2 weeks. No fighting. No heavy lifting. If you see any redness or swelling, you come back immediately. The campaign is not over. Then you fight with one hand or you do not fight at all." He tied off the bandage and met her eyes. "I did not spend an hour putting you back together so you could undo my work in the morning. An hour," she had not realized. Good work takes time. He released her hand, and the absence of his touch felt like a loss. "There are soldiers outside who have been waiting. I need to see them." She stood, cradling her bandaged hand against her chest. It looked strange, wrapped in clean white cloth, too precious for something that existed only to grip a sword. "Thank you. Come back in 3 days," he said. "I want to check the stitches." Kira nodded and left the tent, stepping out into the cold night air. Around her, the camp was settling into exhausted sleep. fires burning low and soldiers wrapped in bedrolls. She made her way back to her own tent, a small structure she shared with no one because no one wanted to bunk with an orc, and sat on her cot staring at her bandaged hand. No one had ever touched her like that, like she was something that could break, like she was worth an hour of careful attention. She lay down, still in her armor, and tried to sleep. But all she could think about was the way Brennan's hands had moved, steady and sure, and the quiet apology in his voice every time the needle pierced her skin. 3 days felt like an eternity. The fighting continued, but Kira found herself held back from the worst of it. Her captain, a grizzled human named Marcus who had fought beside her for 5 years, took one look at her bandaged hand and reassigned her to guard duty. She spent her days walking the perimeter of the camp, watching for enemies that never came, and her nights lying awake thinking about a gray-eyed surgeon who bandaged hands like they were made of glass. On the 3rd day, she presented herself at the medical tent just after dawn, before the worst of the wounded arrived. Liam was there, cleaning his instruments, and he looked up when she entered with an expression that might have been relief. "Kira Brennan," he said. "Let me see." She held out her hand, and he unwrapped the bandage with the same care he had used to apply it. His fingers brushed her palm, and she felt the touch all the way to her bones. "Good," he murmured, examining the stitches. "Very good. No infection and the edges are closing nicely." He looked up at her. "Have you been keeping it dry?" "Yes." "No fighting, guard duty only." "Good." He reached for fresh bandages. "Another week and we can remove the stitches. You will have a scar." "I have many scars, I imagine you do." He began to wrap her hand again, and Kira watched his face, memorizing the slight furrow between his brows, the way his mouth tightened in concentration. "You are the one they call the unbreakable, are you not?" She stiffened. "Some call me that. It is meant as a compliment." "It is meant as a weapon," she said quietly. "It means I am something they can use until I break for real, and then they will find another weapon." His hands paused just for a moment and then continued rapping. "That must be very lonely." The words hit her like a blade between the ribs. She swallowed hard. "I am a soldier. Loneliness is part of the work." "No," Liam said, and his voice was firm. "It is not, or it should not be." He tied off the bandage and released her hand. "Come back in 4 days," she should have left. Should have nodded and walked away and returned to her assigned duties. Instead, she heard herself say, "Why did you become a surgeon?" Liam's expression changed, something shuddering behind his eyes. "Because I was tired of killing. You were a soldier. For 7 years. He turned away, organizing his supplies with movements that were too precise, too controlled. "I was good at it. Very good. And one day I looked at my hands and could not stand what they had done, so I learned to use them for something else." Kira wanted to ask more, wanted to know what had changed him. But the tent flap opened and a soldier stumbled in, clutching his side. And Liam was moving before Kira could speak, guiding the man to a cot and calling for his assistant. She left quietly, slipping out into the morning light, and returned to her post at the camp's edge. 4 days. She would see him again in 4 days. The waiting was a different kind of torture than battle. In battle, there was no time to think, no space for anything but survival and the next strike. But standing watch, walking the empty perimeter, she had nothing but time, and her thoughts circled back to Liam Brennan again and again. The way he had said loneliness should not be part of the work. The shadows in his eyes when he spoke of his past. The care in every movement of his hands. She was falling and she did not know how to stop. On the 4th day, she went to the medical tent again. This time, there were other wounded waiting and she took her place at the end of the line, ignoring the looks some of the human soldiers gave her. She was used to those looks. Suspicion, fear, disgust. Orcs were barely tolerated in the army, and only because they were too useful to turn away. When her turn came, Liam gestured her forward and unwrapped her hand with the same steady care. "You are healing well," he said. "Better than I expected, honestly. Orc physiology must be more resilient than human." "We are hard to kill," she said. "That is not the same as resilient." He checked each stitch, his fingers gentle against her skin. "Resilience is about recovery, not just survival." "I have never thought about it that way. Most people do not." He began to rewrap the hand, but this time his movements were slower, almost reluctant. "The stitches can come out in 3 more days. After that, you will need to be careful with the hand for another week, but you should be able to return to full duty." Full duty. Back to the fighting, the killing, the endless cycle of violence that had defined her life since she was old enough to hold a blade. The thought made her chest ache. What if I do not want to return to full duty? The words were out before she could stop them. Liam's hand stilled. He looked up at her, and his gray eyes were intent, searching. "What do you want, Kira?" She did not know how to answer. What she wanted was impossible, foolish. She wanted to stay here in this tent, watching him work. She wanted him to keep bandaging her hand like it was precious. She wanted to be something other than a weapon. "I do not know," she whispered. He held her gaze for a long moment, and then he finished tying the bandage and released her hand. "Come back in 3 days. We will remove the stitches, and then you can decide." She nodded, not trusting her voice, and left. That night, she lay awake in her tent and admitted the truth to herself. She had fallen in love with Liam Brennan. Completely, helplessly, impossibly in love. She, who had sworn never to let anyone close enough to hurt her, had been undone by gentleness. It was the stupidest thing she had ever done, and she could not bring herself to regret it. The next 2 days passed in a haze of guard duty and restless nights. She found excuses to walk past the medical tent, just to catch a glimpse of Liam working, his dark head bent over a wounded soldier, his voice low and reassuring. Once he looked up and saw her, and he lifted his hand in a brief wave. She returned it, feeling like a fool, and hurried away. On the 3rd day, she went to have the stitches removed. The tent was quiet, most of the wounded having been sent back to their units or to the recovery tents, and Liam greeted her with a small smile that made her heart stutter. "Last visit," he said, gesturing to the stool. "After this, you are free of me." "I do not want to be free of you," she said, and then froze, horrified at herself. Liam went very still. He set down the scissors he had been holding and turned to face her fully. "Kira, forget I said that." She started to stand, but he reached out and caught her uninjured hand. "No," he said quietly. "Do not run." She looked down at their joined hands. His was warm, slightly rough from his work, and the touch sent heat racing up her arm. "This is foolish. I am a soldier and an orc, and you are what? Human." He moved closer, still holding her hand. "Kira, do you think I have not noticed you, that I have not looked forward to your visits? You are the bravest person I have ever met and the loneliest, and every time you leave this tent I want to call you back." She stared at him, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break her ribs. "You could have anyone. Why would you want you?" he said simply. "I want you." She had faced armies without flinching, but this terrified her. She pulled her hand free and held up her bandaged palm. "Take out the stitches, please." Liam studied her for a moment, and then he nodded. "Sit." She sat, and he unwrapped the bandage for the last time. The wound had healed into a red, puckered line across her palm, and the stitches stood out dark against her green skin. He picked up a small pair of scissors and began to snip each stitch, pulling them free with tweezers, and his touch was as gentle as ever. "When I was a soldier," he said quietly, not looking up from his work, "I killed a boy. He could not have been more than 15. He came at me with a sword, and I put my blade through his chest without thinking, because that is what I had been trained to do. He set down the scissors and met her eyes. I watched him die. I held him while he bled out, and he called for his mother, and I could not do anything to save him. That was the day I decided I would never kill again. You were a soldier, Kira said. It was war. It was murder, Liam said flatly. Legal, sanctioned murder, but murder all the same, and I am done with it. He pulled the last stitch free and set the tweezers aside. I am not asking you to stop being a soldier, Kira, but I am telling you that I will never be one again. If that is a problem, it is not. She flexed her hand, testing the healed skin. It pulled slightly, stiff and new, but it would loosen with time. I have killed, too, more than I can count. I do not enjoy it, but it is what I am good at. You could be good at other things. He reached for a small jar of salve and began to rub it into her palm, working it into the scar tissue. If you wanted to be, such as anything. He looked up at her, and his smile was small but real. You are smart and strong and capable. You could learn to heal if you wanted, or build, or farm. The war will not last forever. And what happens when it ends? She was afraid to hope, but the hope was there anyway, fragile and insistent. What happens to us? That depends, Liam said, on whether you want there to be an us. She thought of all the reasons she should say no. The prejudice they would face, an orc and a human together. The danger to him, because anyone who hated her would see him as a target. The impossibility of building a life when she knew only war. And then she thought of his hands on hers, gentle and sure, and the way he had said she was worth an hour of his time. Yes, she said. I want there to be an us. Liam's smile widened, and he leaned forward and kissed her, soft and careful, like she was something precious. Kira closed her eyes and let herself feel it, the warmth of his mouth, the tenderness that still felt so foreign and so right. When they pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I am very glad you split your hand open, he murmured. She laughed, surprising herself. That is a terrible thing to say. I am a terrible romantic. He kissed her again, longer this time, and Kira felt the last of her resistance crumble. They kept their relationship quiet at first, meeting in the evenings after Liam finished his work and Kira completed her rounds. They would walk the edge of the camp together, talking about everything and nothing. And sometimes they would simply sit in comfortable silence, his hand in hers, and watch the stars. Kira learned that Liam had grown up on a farm, the youngest of 4 brothers, and that he had joined the army to escape the tedium of planting and harvest. He learned that Kira had been orphaned young, raised in a human city's slums, and that she had enlisted because it was the only way to eat regularly. I have never belonged anywhere, she told him one night as they sat outside his tent. The orcs think I am too human. The humans think I am too orc. I am always something in between. You belong with me, Liam said and kissed her temple. If that is enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. 3 weeks after her hand had healed, the camp was attacked. Kira woke to the sound of screaming and the clash of steel, and she was on her feet and armed before she was fully awake. Outside, the camp was chaos. Fires burning and soldiers fighting desperately against a wave of raiders who had come out of the forest like ghosts. She cut down 2 men before she even registered what she was doing, her body moving on instinct, and then she thought of Liam, the medical tent. He would be in the medical tent, unarmed and vulnerable. She ran, her sword slick with blood, and killed anyone who got in her way. The tent came into view and her heart stopped. There were 3 raiders inside, and Liam was standing in front of a wounded soldier, his hands raised, his voice calm. There is nothing here worth taking, he was saying. These are injured men. Leave them alone. One of the raiders laughed and raised his sword, and Kira was through the tent flap before he could bring it down. She took his head off with one swing, spun, and drove her blade through the second raider's chest. The third tried to run, and she caught him at the entrance, slamming him to the ground and pressing her sword to his throat. "Go," she snarled. "Tell your friends that this camp is protected. Tell them that if they come back, I will kill every single one of them." He scrambled away, and Kira turned to find Liam staring at her, his face pale. Around them, the wounded soldiers were silent, watching. "Are you hurt?" she asked, crossing to him. "No." His voice was shaky. "No, I am fine. I protected you." She sheathed her sword, her hands trembling slightly. "That is what you do when you love someone." Liam's expression crumbled, and he pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "I have never had anyone fight for me before," he whispered into her hair. "I have always been the one who fights, or the one who heals, but never the one who is protected." "Get used to it," she said, and kissed him, not caring that there were witnesses, not caring about anything except the fact that he was alive and safe. When they pulled apart, he cupped her face in his hands. "I need to tell you something," he said. "I need you to understand why I cannot fight, even to defend myself. You already told me. The boy, there is more." He took a shaky breath. "After I killed him, I tried to keep fighting. I told myself it was my duty, that I was serving my country. But every time I raised my sword, I saw his face. And one day, in the middle of a battle, I froze. I could not do it. I could not kill again. My captain called me a coward and had me reassigned to the medical corps, and I have been here ever since." He met her eyes. "I am not brave, Kira. I am broken." "No," she said fiercely. "You are the bravest person I know. It takes no courage to kill. Any fool with a sword can do that. But to refuse, to choose a different path, to heal instead of harm, that is true bravery. You do not think I am a coward. I think you are the best man I have ever met." She kissed him again, soft and lingering. "And I will spend the rest of my life protecting you if you will let me." "Yes," he said and smiled. "Yes, I will let you." The raid was repelled by dawn, and the camp settled into uneasy vigilance. Kira spent the next few days on high alert, patrolling constantly, but no further attacks came. The raiders had been a desperate band, not an organized force, and the message she had sent with the survivor had apparently been effective. Liam threw himself into caring for the wounded, and Kira found herself lingering in the medical tent, helping where she could. At first, she simply carried supplies and held patients still while Liam worked, but gradually he began to teach her how to clean a wound properly, how to stitch torn flesh, how to recognize the signs of infection and treat it before it spread. "You are a natural," he told her one evening after she had successfully bandaged a soldier's broken arm. "You have steady hands and good instincts." "I have steady hands because I have spent my life holding a sword," she said, but she felt a glow of pride anyway. "You could do this full time," Liam said. "After the war, we could work together." The idea lodged itself in her heart, bright and impossible, a future where she was not a weapon, a future where she healed instead of hurt. "I would like that," she said quietly. Liam smiled and kissed her, and Kira let herself imagine it. A life beyond the war. A life with him. The campaign dragged on through the autumn and into winter, a grinding, miserable affair of mud and cold and endless skirmishes. Kira fought when she had to and spent every other moment in the medical tent, learning. Liam was an exacting teacher, patient but insistent on precision, and Kira discovered that she loved it. Loved the focus it required, the way a successful surgery felt like a victory more meaningful than any battle. She also discovered that people noticed. Some of the soldiers who had once looked at her with suspicion began to nod respectfully when she passed. Others, emboldened by drink or prejudice, muttered slurs, and once a group of them cornered her outside the latrines and told her that an orc had no business playing healer. Liam found out when she came back to the tent with a split lip and bruised knuckles. He took one look at her and set down the bandages he had been rolling. "Who? It does not matter. It matters to me." His voice was tight with anger. "Tell me who." "I handled it." She had knocked two of them down and scared the others off, and her knuckles ached pleasantly from the impact. "They will not bother me again." Liam crossed to her and took her face in his hands, his thumb brushing her split lip. "I hate that you have to fight just to exist," he said quietly. "I hate that people see you as something to fear instead of someone to cherish. I am used to it. You should not have to be." He kissed her forehead, gentle and lingering. "Come on, let me clean that lip." She let him tend to her, and as he worked, she realized something. She was not used to it anymore. She had been once, but Liam had changed her. He had shown her that she could be treated with kindness, with care. And now the cruelty hurt in a way it never had before. She did not know if that was a good thing or a terrible one. Winter deepened, and the fighting slowed. Both sides were too exhausted, too depleted, to do more than hold their positions and wait for spring. Rumors began to circulate that a treaty was being negotiated, that the war might actually end, and the camp buzzed with speculation. Kira tried not to hope too hard. She had seen too many false promises, too many ceasefires that collapsed into violence. But Liam was optimistic and his hope was infectious. "When the war ends," he said one night as they lay together in his tent, wrapped in blankets against the cold, "I want to go back to the frontier. Find a place where we are needed and set up a proper clinic. Somewhere small, where people cannot afford a real physician." "And you think they will accept an orc healer?" she asked, though she wanted to believe it was possible. "I think they will accept someone who can save their lives," Liam said. "And if they do not, we will go somewhere else. We will keep going until we find a place that will have us. That could take a long time. Then we will take a long time." He turned to face her, his gray eyes serious. "I am not going anywhere without you, Kira. Whatever happens, we face it together." She kissed him, slow and deep, and let herself believe. The treaty was signed in late winter, and the news spread through the camp like wildfire. The war was over. They were going home. Except Kira did not have a home. She had the army, and now the army was being disbanded. She had saved almost nothing from her pay, spending most of it on better weapons and armor, and she had no family to return to. She should have been terrified, but all she felt was a strange, bubbling excitement. Liam found her sitting outside her tent, staring at the discharge papers she had just been handed, and he sat down beside her. "So," he said, "what are you going to do now?" "I do not know." She looked at him. "What are you going to do?" "I am going to find a wagon, load it with as many medical supplies as I can beg or borrow, and head west into the frontier." He took her hand. "And I am hoping you will come with me." "As what?" "Your assistant, as my partner." He laced his fingers through hers. "In every sense of the word, if you will have me." Kira's throat tightened. "You are asking me to." "I am asking you to build a life with me," Liam said. "I am asking you to leave the sword behind and pick up a scalpel. I am asking you to marry me, Kira Brennan. If you think you can stand to be tied to a broken-down ex-soldier who talks too much and cannot cook to save his life." She started to laugh, and then she was crying, and then she was kissing him, and he was kissing her back, and the discharge papers fluttered away on the wind, forgotten. "Yes," she said when they finally broke apart. "Yes, I will marry you. Yes, I will come with you. Yes to all of it." Liam grinned, bright and unguarded, and pulled her close. "Good, because I already bought the wagon." They were married 3 days later in a quiet ceremony with a handful of witnesses. The camp's chaplain, a cheerful woman named Beatrice, performed the rites, and Kira wore a simple dress borrowed from one of the laundresses. Liam wore his cleanest shirt and looked at her like she was the only person in the world. When they exchanged vows, his voice was steady and sure. I promise to protect your heart the way you protect my life. I promise to be gentle when the world is harsh. I promise to build something good with you, something worth keeping. Kira's voice shook, but she got the words out. I promise to stand beside you, not behind you or in front of you. I promise to learn to heal. I promise to be your partner in everything for as long as we both live. They sealed the promises with a kiss, and Beatrice declared them married, and Kira felt something inside her settle into place. She belonged. Finally, after a lifetime of searching, she belonged. They left the camp a week later, their wagon packed with supplies and a few personal belongings. Liam drove, and Kira sat beside him, watching the road unroll ahead of them. It was early spring, the world just beginning to wake from winter, and the air smelled of new growth and possibility. "Where are we going exactly?" she asked. "West," Liam said. "There are settlements along the frontier that have been without a healer for years. We will stop in each one and see if they need us. And if they do not want an orc healer, then we keep going." He reached over and took her hand. "I told you, we keep going until we find the right place." The first 3 towns they stopped in turned them away. The fourth, a tiny settlement called Greystone, was more desperate. The town's only healer had died 2 months before, and a fever had swept through the children, leaving parents terrified and helpless. The mayor, a grizzled man named Henry, looked Kira up and down when they arrived and frowned. "You are an orc." "I am a healer," Kira said, lifting her chin. "My husband trained me. If you do not want my help, we will move on." Henry hesitated, and then a woman ran up, clutching a small child who was burning with fever. "Please," she sobbed. "Please, my daughter is dying." Kira looked at Liam and he nodded. She turned back to the woman. "Show me." They set up in the woman's small house, and Kira examined the child with hands that no longer shook. The fever was high, but the girl was still responsive, and Kira could see no signs of the rash that would indicate the worst illnesses. She mixed a tea from willow bark and elderflower, coaxing the girl to drink, and then sponged her down with cool water while Liam spoke quietly to the mother, explaining what they were doing and why. By nightfall, the fever had broken, and the girl was sleeping peacefully. The mother wept with gratitude, and word spread through the town like fire. By the next morning, there was a line of people outside the wagon, waiting to be seen. Kira and Liam worked from dawn to dusk, treating everything from infected cuts to broken bones to chronic coughs. Some people were wary of Kira at first, but her competence won them over. She had steady hands and a calm demeanor, and she never flinched from the hard work. After a week, Henry approached them again. "The town council met," he said. "We would like you to stay. We can offer you a house and a stipend if you are willing." Kira looked at Liam and he smiled. "What do you think?" She thought of the people they had helped, the children who were well again, the gratitude in their parents' eyes. She thought of the way it felt to save a life instead of taking one. She thought of the future they could build here together. "Yes," she said, "we will stay." The house the town provided was small but sturdy, with 2 rooms and a fireplace. Liam set up a clinic in the larger room, organizing supplies and building shelves, and Kira helped, learning the layout and memorizing where everything went. They worked together seamlessly, anticipating each other's needs, moving around each other like dancers. At night they lay in their shared bed, exhausted and content, and talked about the day, who they had helped, what they had learned, what they would do tomorrow. "I never thought I could be happy," Kira said one night, her head on Liam's chest. "I thought I was broken." "You were never broken," Liam said, his hand stroking her hair. "You were a weapon that someone forgot to treat like a person, but you are a person, Kira. You always were." She closed her eyes and let the words sink in. He was right. She had always been a person beneath the armor and the scars. She had just needed someone to see her. The months passed, spring turning to summer, and Kira and Liam became part of Greystone's fabric. People stopped staring at Kira's green skin and started greeting her by name. Children waved when she walked past. The mayor's wife brought them fresh bread every week, still warm from the oven. Kira learned to set bones and deliver babies. She learned to recognize the signs of pneumonia and treat it before it became deadly. She learned that healing was harder than fighting, but infinitely more rewarding. And she learned that love was not a weakness. It was the thing that made her strong. One late summer evening, as they were closing up the clinic, a young woman arrived, heavily pregnant and in labor. Her husband was frantic, and Liam took charge immediately, guiding the woman to the bed they kept for emergencies and assessing the situation. "The baby is breech," he said quietly to Kira. "I am going to need your help." Kira's heart jumped, but she nodded. She had assisted with births before, but never one this complicated. She washed her hands and took her place at Liam's side, following his instructions precisely. It took hours. The woman screamed and wept, and her husband paced outside, and Kira's hands ached from the strain. But finally, the baby came free, a tiny, squalling girl, and Liam placed her in her mother's arms. The woman looked down at her daughter and burst into tears, and her husband came in and kissed them both, and Kira had to turn away because she was crying too. Liam found her outside, leaning against the wall, and he pulled her into his arms. "You did beautifully," he murmured. "I could not have done it without you." "She is alive," Kira said, her voice thick. "They are both alive, because of you." He kissed her forehead. "You saved them, Kira. You." She buried her face in his shoulder and let herself feel it. The pride, the joy, the absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Autumn arrived, painting the trees gold and red, and Kira woke one morning feeling strange. She was tired in a way that had nothing to do with work, and her stomach was unsettled. Liam noticed immediately. "Are you all right?" he asked, his hand on her forehead. "You do not have a fever." "I am fine," she said, but the queasiness persisted, and by the end of the week she knew. She told Liam that evening after they had closed the clinic and eaten a quiet dinner. He was washing dishes and she stood behind him, her arms around his waist, her cheek pressed to his back. "I am pregnant," she said quietly. Liam went very still. Then he turned in her arms, his hands cupping her face, his eyes bright. "You are sure?" "I am sure." He kissed her deep and fervent, and when they pulled apart, he was smiling so wide it looked like it hurt. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" she asked, suddenly uncertain. "I am terrified," he said honestly. "And I am the happiest I have ever been, both at once." She laughed, relieved, and kissed him again. "Me too." The pregnancy was not easy. Kira was sick constantly in the early months, and her body ached in ways she had never experienced. But Liam was endlessly patient, bringing her ginger tea and rubbing her back, and the people of Greystone rallied around them, offering advice and hand-me-down baby clothes. Kira kept working as long as she could, but by the 7th month, Liam put his foot down and insisted she rest. She chafed at the inactivity, but she had to admit he was right. Her body was exhausted and the baby was large and active, kicking her ribs at all hours. "What if I am a terrible mother?" she asked one night, lying in bed with Liam's hand on her swollen belly. "You will not be," he said. "You are strong and kind, and you have more love in you than you know what to do with. Our child is going to be so lucky to have you. And you," she said, covering his hand with hers. "They are going to be lucky to have you too." The baby came in early winter, a long, difficult labor that left Kira shaking and spent. Liam delivered their daughter himself, his hands steady even though his face was pale with worry, and when he placed the baby in Kira's arms, she looked down and felt her heart break open. The baby was perfect. Tiny and green-skinned, with Liam's gray eyes and the smallest tusks Kira had ever seen. She had a wisp of dark hair and a piercing cry, and she looked up at Kira with an expression of absolute trust. "Hello," Kira whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Hello, little one." "What should we name her?" Liam asked, his voice rough with emotion. Kira thought for a moment and then she smiled. "Petra. Her name is Petra." Liam kissed her forehead and then their daughters, and Kira held them both close and marveled at the fact that this was her life. This love, this family, this perfect, impossible happiness. Petra was a healthy, happy baby, and Greystone welcomed her with open arms. The mayor's wife knitted her a blanket. The blacksmith made a tiny rattle. The children brought flowers and asked to hold her, their eyes wide with wonder. Kira learned to balance motherhood and healing, strapping Petra to her chest while she worked, the baby sleeping peacefully through consultations and treatments. Liam was a devoted father, changing diapers and singing lullabies in a slightly off-key voice that made Kira laugh. One afternoon, when Petra was 6 months old, a man arrived at the clinic with a deep gash across his arm. He was a farmer, new to the area, and he looked nervous when he saw Kira. "I heard there was a healer here," he said. "I did not know. I have never been treated by an orc." Kira said calmly. She set Petra down in her cradle and gestured to the chair. "Sit. Let me see the wound." The man sat, and Kira examined his arm. The gash was deep but clean, and it would need stitches. She prepared her supplies, and the man watched her with obvious apprehension. "I promise I know what I am doing," she said, threading the needle. "I have been trained by the best." "I did not mean," the man hesitated. "I have just never met an orc who was not trying to kill me." "And now you are meeting one who is trying to save you," Kira said. "Times change." She began to stitch, her hands as steady as they had ever been, and the man fell silent. When she finished, she bandaged the wound carefully, wrapping it the way Liam had taught her, and the man flexed his arm experimentally. "That feels good," he said, surprised. "Thank you." "Keep it clean and dry," Kira said. "Come back in a week and I will check the stitches." The man nodded and left, and Liam came in from the back room, Petra in his arms. "Well done," he said. "He was afraid of me," Kira said, washing her hands. "And now he is not." Liam kissed her cheek. "You are changing minds, one patient at a time." She leaned into him, letting herself be comforted. He was right. She was making a difference, not with a sword, but with her hands, her knowledge, her care. It was slow work, but it was good work. The seasons turned and Petra grew. She took her first steps on a bright spring morning, wobbling across the clinic floor into Kira's waiting arms. She said her first word, "Mama," and Kira cried. She learned to laugh, a high, bright sound that filled the house with joy. Kira taught her daughter to be gentle with injured animals and to wash her hands before touching anyone who was sick. Liam taught her songs and stories, and Petra listened with wide, solemn eyes, absorbing everything. One evening, when Petra was 2 years old, she asked, "Mama, why is your skin green?" Kira exchanged a glance with Liam, and then she knelt beside her daughter. "Because I am an orc," she said simply, "just like you. And Papa is human. You are both. You are the best of both of us." Petra considered this, and then she nodded, satisfied, and went back to playing with her wooden blocks. Liam reached over and took Kira's hand. "She is going to be extraordinary," he said quietly. "She already is," Kira said, and she meant it. Years passed, and the clinic thrived. Kira and Liam became indispensable to Greystone, and their reputation spread. People came from neighboring towns, seeking treatment, and Kira trained 2 apprentices, a young woman named Clara and a boy named Thomas, both of whom showed real aptitude for healing. Petra grew into a curious, bright child, following her parents around the clinic and asking endless questions. She had Kira's determination and Liam's gentleness, and she was beloved by everyone in town. One summer afternoon, when Petra was 5, a family arrived at the clinic. Their son had fallen from a tree and broken his arm, and Kira set the bone while Petra watched, fascinated. "Does it hurt?" Petra asked the boy. "A little," he admitted. "Mama will make it better," Petra said with absolute confidence. "She always does." Kira's heart swelled, and she finished the splint and sent the family on their way. Then she turned to her daughter. "Do you want to learn to do this?" she asked. "To heal people?" Petra nodded eagerly. "Yes, I want to be like you and Papa." "Then we will teach you," Kira said. "When you are old enough." That evening, after Petra was asleep, Kira and Liam sat outside watching the stars. It was a warm night, the air filled with the chirp of crickets, and Kira leaned against Liam's shoulder, content. "You ever miss it?" Liam asked. "The fighting?" Kira thought about it. She thought about the weight of a sword in her hand, the adrenaline of battle, the simplicity of knowing exactly what was expected of her. And then she thought about the weight of her daughter in her arms, the satisfaction of a successful surgery, the complexity and beauty of the life she had built. "No," she said honestly. "I do not miss it at all." Liam kissed the top of her head. "Good. Because I cannot imagine doing this without you." "You will never have to," Kira said. "I am not going anywhere." They sat in comfortable silence, and Kira thought about how far she had come. From the fiercest orc warrior alive to a healer, a wife, a mother. From someone who had never known gentleness to someone who gave it freely. Every single day. It had started with a bandaged hand, with a man who had treated her like she was made of glass instead of steel. And it had become this, a life full of love and purpose, and the quiet, profound satisfaction of knowing that she was exactly who she was meant to be. Another year passed, and then another. The clinic expanded, and Kira and Liam hired a 3rd apprentice. Petra started school, thriving among the other children, and came home every day bursting with stories. On a crisp autumn afternoon, a messenger arrived from the capital. He carried a letter sealed with the king's crest, and he handed it to Liam with a formal bow. Liam broke the seal and read, his eyebrows rising. "It is an invitation," he said. "The king is establishing a network of frontier clinics and wants to offer us a grant to expand our work." Kira read over his shoulder, her heart racing. The grant was generous enough to build a proper clinic building and buy advanced supplies. It would change everything. "What do you think?" Liam asked. "I think," Kira said slowly, "that we should accept. We could do so much more with the resources, train more healers, reach more people." "It will mean more work," Liam warned, "more responsibility." "We can handle it," Kira said. "Together." Liam smiled and kissed her. "Then let us do it." They wrote back accepting the grant, and within months construction began on a new clinic building. It was larger than the old one, with separate rooms for surgery and recovery, and a classroom for teaching apprentices. Kira and Liam oversaw every detail, and Petra helped where she could, carrying supplies and sweeping floors. The new clinic opened in the spring, and it was everything Kira had dreamed of. Clean, well-equipped, and filled with people who wanted to learn. She taught classes on wound care and infection control, and Liam lectured on anatomy and surgery, and their apprentices soaked up every word. One evening, after a particularly long day, Kira stood in the doorway of the clinic and looked out at Greystone. The town had grown since they first arrived, new houses and shops springing up, new families settling in. And at the heart of it all was the clinic, a place of healing and hope. Liam came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. "Tired?" he asked. "Always," she said, leaning back against him. "But happy." "Me too." He rested his chin on her shoulder. "Do you remember the day we met? You bandaged my hand like it was made of glass," Kira said. "I thought you were insane," Liam laughed. "I thought you were going to punch me. I almost did." She turned in his arms to face him. "And then you apologized for every stitch and I fell in love with you." "Best hand injury I ever treated," Liam said and kissed her. They stood there for a long moment, holding each other, and then Petra called from inside, asking for help with her reading, and they went back in together. The years continued to pass, marked by small joys and quiet triumphs. Petra grew into a skilled healer in her own right, working alongside her parents with grace and competence. The clinic's reputation spread, and students came from across the frontier to learn. Kira's hair began to show threads of gray, and Liam's face gained new lines, but their hands remained steady, and their love remained strong. They worked side by side every day, saving lives, teaching the next generation, building something that would outlast them. One winter morning, when Kira was in her late 40s, a young orc woman arrived at the clinic. She was injured, a deep gash across her shoulder, and she looked terrified when Kira approached. "It is all right," Kira said gently. "I am going to help you." The woman stared at her, disbelieving. "You are an orc." "I am," Kira said, "and a healer. Let me see the wound." She cleaned and stitched the injury with the same care Liam had shown her all those years ago, bandaging it carefully, and the young woman watched with wide eyes. "I did not know orcs could be healers," she said quietly. "We can be anything we want to be," Kira said. "I was a warrior once. Now I am this. You can choose your path too." The woman left, and Kira stood for a moment, remembering the scared, lonely warrior she had been, remembering the man who had seen past the armor to the person beneath. Liam found her later, standing in the clinic, and he took her hand. Her palm still bore the scar from that long-ago injury, a thin white line across the green skin, and he traced it gently with his thumb. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How far we have come," she said. "How lucky I am." "We are lucky," Liam corrected. "Both of us." She kissed him soft and slow, and then they turned back to their work. There were patients waiting, students to teach, lives to save. It was what they did. It was who they were, and it was enough. More than enough. It was everything. On a bright spring morning years later, Kira and Liam stood in the clinic they had built together, surrounded by their students and colleagues. Petra, now a grown woman and a master healer in her own right, was demonstrating a new surgical technique to a group of apprentices. The room was filled with the low hum of conversation, the clink of instruments, the quiet confidence of people who knew their work mattered. A young boy was brought in, his hand split open on a piece of broken glass, and Petra gestured for one of the apprentices to take the case. The apprentice, a nervous human girl named Anne, approached the boy and began to clean the wound. "Gently," Petra instructed. "His hand is not a piece of meat. Treat it like it is precious." Kira watched, her heart full, and felt Liam's hand slip into hers. They stood together, witnessing the legacy they had built, the knowledge they had passed on, the lives that would be saved by the people they had taught. "We did it," Liam said quietly. "We did," Kira agreed. The apprentice finished cleaning the wound and began to stitch, her hands steady, her voice low and reassuring as she spoke to the boy. And when she wrapped the bandage, she did it with care, with tenderness, with the understanding that healing was as much about compassion as it was about skill. Kira smiled and squeezed Liam's hand, and together they turned back to their work, ready to save another life, to teach another lesson, to face whatever came next, together. Always together.